Welcome to the season 1 finale of The Chess Angle. This is our first interview format, and you're about to hear my full, unedited conversation with National Master Tim Mirabile. So, Tim, welcome to the podcast. How does it feel to be the first guest on the Chess Angle?
I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
It's all downhill from here, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, for those of you listening, Tim is a national master with a peak rating of 2281 USCF and 2278 FIDE. He played in his first tournament in 1983 at the age of 17 and has played over 2,000 rated games. Some may know him from the Your Move Chess and Game Store, where he worked from 1996 to 2002. He's a local tournament director and ran the Freeport Chess Club from 2001 to 2006. And of course, he is the assistant TD of the Long Island Chess Club. Tim, as a friend, has helped me out a great deal, and so I certainly appreciate that. And since 2007, he teaches elementary school chess classes for the Long Island Chestnuts and a few other organizations, and has coached several high school chess teams as well as private students. So welcome. So
Thank you.
let me, this is kind of a New York type of vibe, this podcast. So let me ask you a couple of questions. You got to choose one here. Okay. You ready?
Okay.
This is important stuff. Okay.
Yep. All right.
Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Neither.
Oh man. No,
I
no.
don't drink coffee at all.
Oh my goodness.
I had a problem with caffeine. I seem to be very sensitive to it. And
Okay.
like a small amount of caffeine will affect my sleep. So I got rid of it. And that, I think that helped my game actually.
Oh, all right. That's interesting. It's true. You know, I mean, I was reading about this because I do drink it. I'm a Starbucks guy. I like it like acid.
Okay. Yeah.
If I go to Dunkin' Donuts, I have to drink their midnight roast, the dark roast. But they say if you quit caffeine, you actually have more energy because you don't have those highs and lows. You actually sleep better. That's what they say. I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I haven't done it, but that's probably the right answer. Is neither.
Right.
You know,
Although it's like when you quit, it's like a month of suffering. So you got to be prepared for that.
The withdrawal. I imagine. Okay, so let's talk pizza because we have the best pizza in the world in New York. Okay, thin crust or deep dish?
Thin crust, traditional, pizza.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. See, I had you pegged as a deep dish guy. See, I'm 0 for 2.
My parents owned a restaurant with pizza and, hot dogs, hamburgers, and French fries and all that stuff. So that was bad for me because I ate way too much when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't know that. See, I'm learning all these things about you. So another choice, here's a little more of a serious turn. Okay. So E4 or D4?
Well, it's E4.
Yeah, you're
best
an
by
E4.
test, according to Fisher.
Right. E4 is best by test. Yeah, that's Fisher. Right. I'm a D4 guy. You know that.
Right.
Well, we'll get to that. Well, at some point you'll poke.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah.
You'll poke fun at me for my London system. We'll get to that. All right, cool. No, I know you're an E4 guy, but let me ask you. Let's start there. Do you have favorite openings that you play? Because again, you're a master. It's different for those of us who are still in the class ranks. But do you have openings that you like to play all the time? Do you change it if your opponent is significantly lower rated? Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
I try not to change my openings. The only time I might change something is if I know I'm going to play somebody and I get a chance to prepare. And mostly it's going to be, I want to deviate as early as possible, especially if it's a lower rated player, because I don't want them to be able to memorize, the same thing we did last time and not make any mistakes this time. So that would be the time that I change.
Yeah. Oh, so against lower rated, you like to deviate from the book.
Not necessarily deviate from the book, but I play the same players over and over again in the local club. So I want to deviate from our previous games.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Whereas a lot of times I'm okay like getting the same position, but that's probably true. Now, do you find these lower rated players, if you deviate and it's something new, it kind of catches them off guard and then they're more prone to blunder?
I'm not necessarily looking for that. Just not. I'm looking for them not to, have 15 moves that are engine or grandmaster moves ready
Right.
to go.
Got
So
it.
it's more like I want them to be on their own.
Right. You
And I
don't
think
want,
that's pretty
yeah.
common.
Okay. So you don't want them to be able to bang out like 20 moves on autopilot.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Now, do you have like specific openings that you like playing?
Definitely. And when we talk about the books, I'm going to talk about how I chose them. But
Okay.
as black, I basically play the Sicilian and the Grunfeld.
Okay.
And I've tried a few other things, but I keep coming back to these. And I have, at this point, too much experience with them to change, really.
Right. Okay. All right, cool. So let me ask you about your poker experience, because it's my
Uh,
understanding you have an interesting background with that, and you were pretty successful. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know that's a little cliche, the whole chess and poker thing, but I'm kind of fascinated by that and how many chess players have some experience playing or still do play. So yeah, can you talk about that a little bit?
okay, yeah. I mean, I used to play with friends, and we play these dumb games like, Follow the Queen, and I can't even think of these games, Deuces Wild or something like that.
Right. Sure.
And I never played real regular standard Hold'em with them. But I was also interested in trading. So I was on this trading message board, and someone was suggesting, poker. And this was roughly 2003 when Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker.
Mm-hmm.
And there was kind of a poker boom at that time because he was kind of like a regular guy who won, I don't know what, it was $1 million or something
Right.
at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And the price,
Sure.
of course, had gone way up. Uh, and also, I had a friend who's a chess player who came over. I was over another friend's house, and he played a poker tournament online, and I watched him, and it was pretty good. And he won, I think he won $20 from a $2 entry fee. Nothing big, no big deal. But this message board post suggested, you could actually make good money playing online poker. And at the time, the most popular game was Limit Hold'em.
Mm-hmm.
So I read like one or two books from the bookstore, and I put $300 on Paradise Poker, and I started playing. And I ran my account up to like $600. Then I tried to play higher stakes, ran it back down to like $100. Went back to the lower stakes, and within a couple of months, I'm like, oh, there's $4,000 in my account. I'm doing pretty well. So I just continued studying and playing, and that was pretty much it.
Okay. No, that's better than
Yeah,
most. Most
yeah.
people, after the whole moneymaker thing, they got into it, but not much happened. All right, cool.
Right.
So let's get right to it. Let's talk about system openings and the London system.
Hmm.
And let me kind of set this up because, as you know, and I just want everyone to know, full disclosure, I believe in system openings. I
Right.
play the London system myself. I've had a good amount of success, and I like it because it's ready to go. It's more concerned about where the pieces belong, and you can play out of order. Pretty
Right.
much no matter what black throws at me, I can use the London system. And also in my particular situation, just, my study time's limited. Plus, I'm also directing and playing, which is a big thing. So I like the fact that if I'm busy directing and doing pairings, I can kind of sit down and just know that I have an opening that I can rely on. And contrary to what some say, there is a lot of sting to it. It can be very tactical and very interesting. It's not always the same boring positions. That's sort of a criticism of the London system and system openings in general,
Right.
is that they're very boring and mechanical, especially the London, which I don't really think is true because you can take it in an attacking direction. Like you can just have that hold on
Right.
the center, play very slow, go into an end game, but you can also keep your king uncastled, have that hold on e5 and then play h4 and
Mhm.
get an attacking thing. I mean, I've had some games where I've won against some decent players in a small amount of moves just from that attacking pattern, like with an h4 and not castling because they
Right.
didn't know how to handle it. Now, don't get me wrong, I've also had some horror shows as well,
Right.
but
Right.
overall, I've had success with it. But you have some GMs out there and others, I won't name names, but they'll say that it's a limiting opening and that it's not good and that it's, a lazy player's opening. It's going to stifle your progress, which I don't agree with. I mean, Magnus uses it not all the time, not as his mainstream, but
All right.
it's in his bag. I mean, Magnus plays the London and very well, and he'll even play it positionally. GM Simon Williams is a big guy on it. You have Cyrus Lakdawala, but then you have your crew of people who don't like it. And
Right.
I understand there's both sides of it. And again, full disclosure, I'm in favor of it, but I suspect you may have some issues with it, and that's fine. I'd like to discuss it so we can look at both sides. So what are your thoughts on like system openings and specifically the London system?
Okay, well, I had a joke on the someone posted on Facebook, what's a reason why you might not give someone a rematch when they play online? And I answered the opponent played the London system. So that always got, that got some laughs from the
right.
from the commenters. But
That's
it's really just a joke, and really that really applies to online blitz games because you really want to play something a little more interesting, I think.
Right. Okay.
And everybody's individual and they have to do what they have time for. So if you have time to really study all the mainline openings, that's different than if you're an adult and you're working full-time job and you don't have time to do that and you wanted to play a system opening, that's fine too. The London system, I guess its reputation comes from the fact that some people play it very unambitiously. So that's where, that's when it becomes a, problem. Just because I don't, if I'm playing, I don't want to be, kind of like bored to death in the game. So,
right. I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that because for a long time, it was kind of slow for me. The way I played the London, it was very slow,
Right.
strategic. I mean, I actually like those kind of games. I think it's also style. I kind of like a very slow squeeze, maybe milk like a small positional advantage, and then you gradually win. Like I'll take that over a crazy tactical thing any day. But where I started getting more aggressive with it, with like an H4 type move, is when I started studying the Simon Williams videos out there and his theories. He's a very aggressive player, which I'm generally not. I'm more like, positional, kind of protect everything type of guy.
Right.
But he has a more aggressive approach to everything. And he also is an advocate for the French defense, which I play as well. So when I was looking at his videos, it was a much more aggressive approach than I was used to. But I started trying some of these things and I was actually having a lot of success. Not so much that my play was brilliant, but my opponents were kind of like, they didn't know how to respond. And then it ended up just going in a different direction because they blundered.
Right.
But I agree with what you're saying. You have to do what you have time for. Oh, go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead, Tim.
And I think that could happen with any opening. You could play almost any opening a lot more aggressive than most people do. So you can always find something to shake things up.
All right. But you wouldn't say, I mean, and maybe you will. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I mean, would you say the London system is bad, like people shouldn't do it?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I mean, if a student came to you and said, this is what I play, would you try to open them up to some other things? Or would you say, this is fine, we'll stick with that as white?
It really depends on the student. Like I have one very good student, but he does not plan on becoming a chess professional. He's going to, he's going to go to college and everything. So, but he said, he wants to be some kind of master. Now, if he told me something else, if he said, look, I want to be a grandmaster, I want to be a chess professional, I might suggest something different. I might say, you have to learn you pretty much have to learn everything, I think, if you have a lot of ambition in chess, because you have to be willing to switch openings and play whatever the situation calls for, and also to get familiar with more different kinds of positions. So if you say somebody learns the London system and it's similar positions every time they play, that's good, but playing more different openings exposes you more different kinds of position and will increase your chess knowledge. So I think there's both sides to that.
That's a fair point.
On who the player is and what their goals are and their ambitions are.
That's a fair point. Like if I said, if I said I wanted to become a GM or something like that, I would have to really look into, perhaps changing things up a bit. No, right. But that's some good stuff. No, very, very well said. So let's move on to your background and, specifically when you became serious about the game. what sort of prompted you to study more and maybe enter tournaments. Maybe you could talk about a book that might have influenced you, something like that. But
Mhm.
let's, give us an idea of your background and when you became serious.
Okay, so it's my situation is kind of unique. I'm probably one of the early players who um, really learned how to play by playing against computers. Now, yeah, my dad taught me when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and that was in the early 70s. He never mentioned Bobby Fischer, but it's funny that that was at the same time that the Fischer boom was going on. And then, years later, around 1980-ish, we got a chess computer, one of those Fidelity tabletop computers that you push down on the squares and you move the pieces. And it was very weak, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I played on its lowest level. I played hundreds of games and lost every time until I started to win. I started to win games, and then I move up a level and I'd win games against that, and I'd keep moving up. And that, I took out some beginner books. I went to the library and got some books. I don't really remember what they were. Maybe a Reinfeldt book. I had Horowitz's Chess for Beginners. I had Logical Approach to Chess by Irva and some others. And, I learned a little bit, but then I used to read the Sunday chess column. And around 1983, I saw that there was an ad for the National Chess Club holding the National Championship in September of 1983 or October. And I just got my driver's license, so I said, I'm going to go play in this tournament. So I spoke to Harold Stenzel on the phone, and we talked about it, and I showed up there. Oh, and I should say, I also I had this one book called How Good Is Your Chess by Leonard Barden. It's like a quiz book where you cover up the page and you try to guess the next
Mm-hmm.
move.
Okay.
And this thing said I had a 2100 rating. So I was like, oh, this is good. I'm going to go in and, I'm going to play in the highest section that Harold allows me to
Right.
play, which is the under 2100 section.
Yeah. Right.
And
Okay.
I insisted on playing. He recommended I didn't, but I did anyway. And actually, it was a good experience. I got to play 7 rounds and I lost all 7 games, but it was fine. I didn't get discouraged. I played some good games. The players said I was probably in the 1600 range. So
Okay.
that was pretty much it. And the problem with the book, like that, How Good Is Your Chess is, it really telegraphs the brilliant moves. You can see the sacrifice coming, whether it's a sacrifice on h7 or a sacrifice on e6. And if you guess that, you get like a whole bunch of extra points. And it doesn't take away anything if you consider a move that's a total blunder. So, that's really, chess is not so much about finding the brilliant moves as it is about playing the entire game without blundering and giving away the game. So I think that's the reason why I got such a high score on that book and was not 2100 when I started playing.
All right. Still interesting. And you mentioned about it. You had to play all those games in the beginning and how even though it was against the computer, how you lost all those games, right? What's
Yeah.
that old saying? You have to lose. What was that Capa? Who said that you have to lose like hundreds of games before you become a good player? I think it was
Oh yeah, yeah,
Capablanca,
definitely.
right?
Something funny is I was playing the computer once and I got to king and rook versus king and I didn't know how to win. So I switched sides and had the computer show me how to checkmate,
Right. Okay.
you know.
All right, cool. Now you mentioned, I was just listening to your story. You mentioned Fred Reinfeldt.
Right.
He's sort of the, I guess he was like a Jeremy Silman, but back then, so to speak, as far as,
Right.
or he was sort of one of the fathers, I guess, of modern chess education, so to speak. But
Hmm.
there was like a double book, or it was several books put together. It was Fred Reinfeldt, The Complete Chess Course.
Right.
It was like a thick, this was before
That,
like digital
yeah,
stuff
that
and
I,
Amazon. Oh, go
that I
ahead,
never
Tim.
read. No. Yeah,
Okay,
that I
yeah,
never
that
read.
that was my first
Oh,
serious
okay.
book. I mean, it didn't really help me help me much, but it kind of helped me make the transition from just kind of knowing how the pieces move.
Right.
All right, but good stuff. So now let's talk about the actual game itself. Can you talk a little bit about your thought process while you're moving? Because I notice when you play at the club, you always seem just very composed and very patient. You never seem impulsive, and you really, I don't know, you have everything under control.
Right.
Which is something I admire, because I think a lot of us, we let nerves kind of get the better of us. And even if you're in a little bit of time pressure, which is rare for you,
Mhm.
you still keep your composure, which is fascinating to me, because I think that's something, that stands out as a major difference between stronger players and, weaker ones. But can you talk about your thought process? Like, what's going on in your head? Like, how many moves ahead are you looking? Are you, anything like that, you think can help the listeners out there, most of whom are, class players looking to get better?
Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of that is experience. And part of it is deliberate. Like when people talk about, people are just starting, they get distracted by the clock, they get distracted by having to keep score. And I say, look, when the opponent makes a move, do not think about their move until you wrote it down, and then press the clock and then start thinking. Because otherwise, you're gonna think for a minute. You may forget to write down. You may forget to press the clock, and then you remember, and it's distracting. So I would say, write. Your opponent makes a move, you write it down. You write it down. When it's your turn, you decide what move you want to play. You play it on the board. You press the clock. You write it down. And while you're doing those side things, don't try to think about the position at the same time. That's the first part. And then everything else is very position dependent. A lot of times I know kind of what I want to do. Like I have a plan and I'm just following through from what I was thinking on previous moves. So the other important thing is, once you've decided on your move, you have to check to make sure it's not a blunder in some way, and make sure you're not allowing some kind of tactical shot. And when you think about your move, you have to try to prove that your move might be wrong. So you have to, instead of saying, looking for ways your move is right, and this I got from FM Roger LaFleur, he mentioned this, prove your move is wrong, not prove your move is right. And if you can't do that, then it's a candidate to be played. But, and obviously when the time gets low, that can go out the window. But, as long as you have the time, you do want to do that as far as blunder checking. And then the other thing, this I got from FIDE Master Mark Ritter. He mentioned one time, don't assume that your opponent can't play a move. Like, it's like, if you're thinking, well, if I go here, he can't do this. And then you go here and he does that, and it's very good, and you underestimated it. So you really have to consider what your opponent can do to you, and don't assume that they can't do something, because there might be a tactical reason that they can do it.
Right. So the theme here, and this is such a big thing. I mean, I've talked about this before. You really need to be in tune to your opponent's ideas as well, not just your own.
Right.
And you remind me, that's almost like a game theory type of thing, right? When you have an idea, game theory state, you want to poke holes in it. What's wrong with it? I had studied briefly with the late IM Danny Kopeck, bless his soul. And he used to tell me, before you make a move, kind of similar to what you said, what Roger was telling you, you almost have to be cynical. You almost have to say, okay, I looked at this move now. Why is it wrong? Like, why is this a bad move?
Yes.
And that can be even on a simple or more complex level. I played a game just the other night. I mean, in fairness, my opponent was much lower rated, but still I was winning, but I was about to make a move where I almost missed a night fork, where I saw it and I didn't realize, and I talked about this in the previous episode, it was a backwards night move. And I kind of saw it, but I didn't see it. I was like, oh, well, if he does, it's kind of what you were saying, like, don't assume he can't do this.
Right.
And I'm like, if I move my king to attack his knight, he can then move his knight. And I was like, wait, I can't. But I was annoyed at myself that I'm glad I saw it, but I was annoyed at myself that it took me longer to realize that. But I guess that happens, when you're playing.
Yeah, things happen during the game, and you can get distracted. You can have a lapse, and that's why you have to check yourself, because if you always make the first move that comes to mind, those things are going to happen. So
right. But then the funny thing was, I realized the right move was I actually had a bishop shot that wins a pawn because it was like a pin thing. And then of course, when I played that, he was like, wow, and I ended up winning. But it's just, it's like you said, it's easy to miss things, and it's easy to assume, oh, he can't do that, but he can. All right, good stuff. So let's talk about your teaching style and your approach. So you have a student. I mean, obviously it's dependent on each student's needs, but I don't know, maybe you do believe in certain, universal study plans, but talk a little bit about, your teaching style and your approach.
Okay, so I do, two different kinds of teaching. When I teach in an elementary school, it's just trying to get them to make legal moves and not, you know,
Right.
not move into check and not capture the opponent's king and not
And not
go
keep
up 30.
playing a game when each player just has a king on the board, right?
Yeah, that happens. And also now I'm at the intermediate level, so the most common thing for these students is to go up 30 points of material and then stalemate their opponent. So
Right.
it's,
Okay.
yeah, that's one thing. But yeah, when I teach an individual student, I really want to go over their own games. So I would like them to play, and not all of them have time to play. So I want to look at their own games pretty deeply. I want to, or they can do it themselves also. So you can look and see what could each player have done better throughout the game. Try to find the turning points of the game where the advantage swings from one player to the other, and that's pretty much it. Just heavily analyze your own games. And some people can't really handle this. They don't take criticism well. They might try to gloss over their mistakes, and I think it's important to own up to your mistakes and try to figure out where you could have done better.
Right. Now, I definitely agree. I think reviewing your own games is probably number one. That's the most important thing, because you can look at theory and ideas and themes, but if there's particular things in your own games, I know that's most helpful for me. A lot of others have said it too.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
had another
Yeah.
thing I want to talk about was there's something called the growth mindset, where you have to believe that your effort can make you better. And if you believe, look, I'm this player, let's say I'm a 1500 player and that's what I am. It's different. You have to think that you can get better and that your effort is going to pay off, and you will get better. And I'm going to include a link. I'm going to give you some of a list of the books I suggest, and then not suggest, but and the a link to this also, this growth mindset
Okay.
idea.
Yeah, we'll put all this
But,
in the show notes.
yeah,
Yep.
and part of it is they talk about how players who don't have this, they have a fixed mindset. They want praise for their games. Like I had a former student who wanted to show me a game and wanted me to. He was like searching for compliments on his moves. I'm like, you realize I played 2 games of the world champions. Your game is not going to impress me. Just, not to be, I never said that to him, but, that was my thoughts, not to be harsh, but,
Mm-hmm.
you really have to be able to take criticism and own your mistakes. And that's how you get better. You don't get
Absolutely.
better by praising your own moves.
Now, did you read Mindset by Carol Dweck? Because that's
No, I
what
did
you're.
not, but I'm
Okay.
actually going to send you a link to one of her articles about that. But that's,
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't
I
read the book yet. I should.
Yeah, for one of my graduate courses, I read it. I read it recently. I mean, like 6 months ago. It's Mindset
Mhm.
by Carol
Right.
Dweck. Very readable. It's not your typical, tough, awful like academic writing. It's written in
Right.
kind of an everyday vernacular.
Mhm.
It's not like you're reading a journal article or anything. But she talks about having a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. But to your point, every chess player should read that
Yeah.
mindset. Absolutely. Because you do have to believe that's something that I struggle with as well, because I think a lot of players, let's say you're rated 1700 and you sit down against the 2000, so many of the 17 they're just going to be like, oh, like what's the point? It's very, you have to muster up that confidence and that belief, and it's easier said than done
Yes.
sometimes.
Yeah.
So all right, so what would you say are the most common amateur mistakes that you see? I mean, both as a player, as a teacher. I did a whole episode about this, episode 18, where I kind of gave it from my point of view, just working with beginners and my experience. But what have you noticed? I'm curious what your perspective
So,
is. And I'd like to hear this more as a player, like when you're in tournaments playing against some lower rated competition, maybe, what do you notice of the mistakes that happen over and over again?
okay. So when you say an amateur player, what level would you
I would
consider
say
that?
anybody rated below 2000.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, what I find is they can play well in the opening. They can, learn their opening. They can study it. Um, and if the game is quiet for a while, they can actually play pretty reasonable. I'm talking even very low rated players in the, 1400 range, where I've had games where somebody has looked on and said, "Oh, you're 15 moves into this game against a 1400 and you're not winning yet." Well, they played a reasonable opening and you know, but a lot of times with players like that, as soon as you start making threats, they fall apart. They overlook the threat and, you can just win some material or something and then the other thing is when they do hold it together to the end game, they definitely have trouble with the transition from the middle game to the end game and, getting into a disadvantage that way. And that's why I try to squeeze out a lot of points that way. If my friend FM Joel Salmon used to comment on my games at Freeport when I was playing a lower-rated player, he would come up and see a fairly even ending, and he'd think to himself, "I wonder how Tim's going to win this one." So
Yeah, right.
that was my reputation at the time.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a strategy that I've used this also. I happen to like end games. What some players will do, even rated higher than I am, they'll just kind of trade down a lot because they know their end game skills are strong, and they know their opponent. They assume their opponent's end game skills are not strong, so they'll just like, I'm just going to trade down, get into an end game, even if it's even. I'll end up squeezing out a win, and I'm assuming a large portion of the time you could probably get away with that, but sometimes it might come back to bite you.
Right.
But what you said about them not seeing threats, of course, is certainly true. All right, Tim. So let's discuss a little bit what your favorite books are. You may have mentioned a few already, but are there any particular books that you feel, are your favorite, or that you feel lead to strong improvement? And maybe you could talk about some online sites as well that you like, both for playing and for instructional material as well.
Okay. Let me start with the sites that I use. I'm pretty much going to go through what I use, and it might not be the best for everyone.
Okay.
But the two obviously common ones are leadchess.org and chess.com. I use them for playing and for tactics problems, and for especially chess.com, I use the game analysis feature.
Okay. So so let me ask you.
Yes.
Even with your rating at this point, you still spend a lot of time studying?
I do study my own games after I play them a lot, and I prepare openings pretty much, and then I play quite a bit online. Just right now I'm playing 5+5 minute with 3 second increment.
Okay.
It's a little bit longer than most people play. Like 3+2 is pretty popular.
Right.
I don't play bullet.
Yeah, I like 5-5. That's like my new
5-5.
thing.
Okay. Yeah.
I like 5-5. I'm a 5-5 guy, but that's just me. But anyway, please continue.
It's like, as I get older, I want to increase the time control. So,
right.
When I was playing on ICC, which is not what it used to be, I used to play the 5-0 pool, and now I really want to play with increment, and I want to play longer.
Let me ask you, what's going on with the ICC? Because I used to play on that like years ago. I never really liked it, the layout. I'm a chess.com guy. That's just me. I happen to like them for playing. But is the ICC, I'm almost embarrassed. I mean, because I'm a chess.com and I'm kind of a one and done guy. I don't want to have to worry about which site do I go on, because then I get like decision fatigue. So chess.com is for me, but that's just me.
Right.
I know there's others out there that are good. But what's going on with ICC? Is that still a thing? Do people still use that? Because I don't even hear about it that much anymore.
Yeah, it still exists. I played on the predecessor to ICC, which was ICS, and I started playing there in 1992. So you can see how long I've had. I was using a IBM PC computer with a dial-up modem and a DOS, interface.
Okay.
To connect ICC. But
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Right?
No, it's fine. The player pool has really dropped off, and I think part of it is the web programs are just much easier for people. They can just go on a website, especially if you're using a computer that doesn't belong to you. You don't want to install software. You just go on a website and play. You log in with your name, and then then it's done. If you're using someone else's computer, or you're using a school or a library computer. And also some people, even their own computer now, they don't want to download software.
So ICC, it's not web-based, in other words. It's still a download.
I don't know. They may have had one, and they may have had
all right, so we don't know. Don't quote us on anything.
Right.
We're just we don't know about the ICC. We're just talking here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are other people ask more than me who understand that, the history of the ICC. Maybe Brian Caron, who is an admin there, knows a lot about it. He'd be a better person to ask, and I think he's done
He's still
interviews where he
okay.
mentioned
He's
this.
still working with them.
I think he's an admin there, but their player pool has dropped off just so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Compared to the two major sites, Lead Chess and Chess.com, they're just they have a much larger player pool.
Right, and especially since with the pandemic, and then of course the Queen's Gambit,
Mm-hmm.
their registrations like skyrocketed. I mean, they were
yeah.
already doing well, but they're making out real well right
Mm-hmm.
now. Same with the club. I mean,
Oh yeah, I've
our
seen
club,
it.
the Long Island Chess Club, between the
How
pandemic and
many
the go ahead, Tim. I'm sorry.
how many unrated players are in this most recent tournament? Almost half the tournament, right? It
A
seems like.
lot, a lot. I won't pull it up now, but it's got to be close to 30 to 40%, right?
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
the past few tournaments, we've had almost half, which is fantastic. And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny. I had talked about this, but it's worth repeating. My biggest fear, and I think I even posted this somewhere. My biggest fear with the pandemic was that people were going to play online. Because that's what happened. The pandemic
Right.
happened. I'm going back to like spring and summer of 2020 when people were like afraid to go food shopping.
Oh yeah.
And when you had your groceries delivered, you were like wiping them down with Clorox wipes. Like I'm talking,
I never did that, but yeah.
people were afraid to, you were a non-wiper. Okay.
Right.
But when it was really bad and people didn't want to leave the house, it was like, all right, let's play chess. Let's find the chess set in the basement, or people would play online.
Right.
So, you had people playing online from that. And then when the Queen's Gambit came out, I have my date switch. Was it October of the same year? Was it October 2020? Does that sound right?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Whenever it was, but it was around the same time. It was like a double whammy. So you had people from the pandemic. Then you had people watching Queen's Gambit. And remember, Queen's Gambit wasn't just about chess. It was about tournament chess. And what happened was I was worried that everyone was just going to play online and that live clubs were going to be extinct. As it turns out, this is sort of a Freakonomics kind of perspective. It actually increased in-person attendance because people realized what all of us, who've been playing chess for a long time realize, which is that online chess is just not the same. It's just not the same as playing in person. And that tactile experience, it's just not. And
that's what I was going to say. I mean, people can play online as much as they want, but it's a poor substitute for playing online. I mean, playing in person.
100%.
It's hard to know. Your opponent can cheat. It's hard to get a good idea if they're legitimate or not. You can't really play for any significant stakes because of that.
All good points. Yeah.
It's and just playing in person, you're going to play a longer game. Online is mostly blitz. Even the slow time controls that you might play online are considered fairly fast time controls for an in-person game. So,
and there's something about playing online where even if you try to take it seriously, it's still doesn't have the same integrity as playing in person. I guess because it's just inanimate. But anyway, my worry about live chess sort of becoming extinct was completely unfounded because the online boom just prompted people to want to play live more because it just wasn't satisfying them enough. So kind of worked out.
It's strange that the mix of players at the clubs are changing. It seems like before the pandemic, we were getting a lot of kids coming in, very young kids, 5 through 9 or whatever.
Sure.
And then the older players were there, and a lot of the older players didn't like to play the kids. The kids are very tactical and sharp, and they're almost always underrated because their rating can't keep up with their strength increase. And then after the pandemic, like especially at your club, I see a lot of young adults playing. And I think that's part of the Queen's Gambit and the online chess effect.
Absolutely.
The kids are almost gone, and a lot of the older players didn't come back. Either they're staying home or they moved out of New York. So
Right. Either they're staying home, they're still worried about it, or they moved away, or
Right.
they don't want to play with a mask.
Right. That's true.
As
Yeah.
TD of the club, I've gotten, I want to show up the club, but I'm not going to, I can't wear a mask for 3 hours and play. So, they'll come back. I mean, our numbers are good now. So when this finally, I don't want to say when it goes away, because now they're saying it might be with us, but when it gets significantly better, I
Right.
think we're going to see an even bigger increase in our numbers, because all the old regulars are going to come back.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, Tim, we kind of talked about if we went on a few different
Oh, I had a
paths,
couple of
which is
yeah.
fine. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to hear about your favorite books a little bit.
Okay. Oh,
Oh,
I had a little bit more about the websites first.
oh, please go ahead.
Okay.
No, we got
So
time. Go
yeah,
ahead.
as far as tactical problems, the problems on Chess and chess.com, more Elite Chess are computer generated problems, which means they have an engine run through the games that are played on their own site, and they pick out the situations where there's one move that's better than every other move, and that they make that into a chess problem, and then they give it to people, and based on the ratings that solve it and the ratings that don't solve it, the puzzle itself gets a rating. So that's how they create their problems. Now on Elite Chess, it's always a winning move. On chess.com, sometimes you have to find a drawing move. So that's a little bit better. So you don't always know if your problem you're being presented with is a win or a draw.
Okay.
But the part of the problem with those two are you can kind of cheat a little bit because you know that there's only one good move. So,
Right.
there's no partial credit if you find, sometimes you get a problem. It's like, okay, I happen to move my rook. My rook's on E1. And if I move the rook to E2 or E3, well, those are obviously identical if there's nothing on the side going on. It's just a matter of keeping the rook on the file. So neither one of those could be the solution because there's only one good move. So you have to look elsewhere. You can kind of cheat that way. There's a site I liked called chessking.com. They have
Okay.
more human generated problems for all levels. I'm not getting paid by them at all, so don't worry about that. But I did subscribe to them a couple times and used they have some very advanced courses. Another website that I think is very good is Bill Walsh Chess Page. It has a lot, if you just Google that, it has a lot of PGN files for the books you might be reading, so you can actually load up, you can hold the book and you could load up the game on your computer without having to move pieces around. It's a lot faster. And for software, I use ChessBase. It's pretty essential if you're a good player. And I store all my own games. I use the online database with
Yeah,
millions of games.
absolutely.
So yeah.
Yep. So do you store your games in the online cloud?
No, I have them in a local file, but
Oh, local.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I started sometime I got the ChessBase 4.0 for DOS way back in the old days, and I started entering my new games, and then I had a separate file where I'd catch up on my old games. So I actually have all the games I ever played in USCF in my database back from 1983. So
Okay.
it's pretty interesting, and I sometimes use them for lessons. If I want a short game, I could find something. I
Okay.
can find a game where beginners were playing because it's back from when I was beginner. So
All right. Cool.
it's a good thing to have.
Okay. Any books you want to share that you
Books,
like?
okay, yeah. I'm going to talk about the books that I used when I was learning, and they
Sure.
may
Yeah.
not necessarily be the best books now because I don't keep up with that. So
Probably those. This is just my opinion. Most of the more classic books, um, not so much like from the 20th century, but even the early 2000s. Those are probably better than a lot of the ones coming out now.
hmm,
Or, I mean, yes and no. There are some good ones. I shouldn't say that. There are some good ones coming up now. I guess my point is that some of those classic books are just timeless.
right.
They're
I know
just. Yeah. Go ahead.
you talked about in one of your podcasts, The Amateur's Mind
Oh, that's my
by
book.
Silman. Yeah, that's kind of after my time, so I didn't read that one
Okay.
ever, but I did recommend it to a student because I did page through it and see that it's similar to what they needed. So I
Right.
did
That's
like that
that's
one
the one
myself.
book. I mean, you're one to say it more than I am, but anyone who's really struggling, or if I'm teaching a beginner, I always tell them, I go, if you just want one book, if you're only going to read one book as an amateur player looking to get better, read The Amateur's Mind.
Right. Yes, I had.
That's the one you want to start with.
I once had someone come into the Your Move store and asked for a beginner book recommendation. Then I recommended a few, and then he said, "Did you read these books yourself?" And I'm like, "Well, no, because they weren't published. They're published 20 years after I was a beginner. So."
All right, so let's hear these classics that you like.
Okay, so I talked curious. Before about how I chose my openings, and people can kind of see that a lot of them were based on Bobby Fischer's games. So Bobby Fischer's My Six Memorable Games was one of the influential books for me.
Classic.
And there's also a book called The Chess of Bobby Fischer by Robert Berger, and that's a much more instructional book. There's different chapters. There is an end game chapter. There is he breaks things down by theme. As far as the tactics, there's like a back rank chapter, for example. So that was a very good instructional book for me. I don't even know if it's available in algebraic notation. It might just be descriptive, but
okay.
Yeah. So
I'm laughing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, these are all books.
It's I keep interrupting. It's an Italian thing. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just laughing because there's still a few guys at the club, like relatively younger guys, like under 50. We won't name names. This is more of a local thing, but they use descriptive notation still.
Yes.
And I constantly have to comment I just can't help myself. It's like, really? You're still using descriptive notation?
I know who you're talking about.
Pawn to queen 4? No, there's 2.
Okay.
I don't want to embarrass
young
anybody.
Players using okay.
No, one of them's young. One of them's older than I am.
Okay.
Who uses descriptive notation? I just laugh because I play in direct, so I'll walk around. Because every tournament there's always one table where they insist on setting the clock wrong, and it's 2 hours into the game and nobody realizes it. So I always double check. But every time I walk by and I see like pawn to queen 4, rook to king knight 5, I'm like,
oh yeah,
I'm like, really?
There was when Chess Life used to advertise books, and I don't know if they do this anymore, but they used to tell you they have a code for whether it was algebraic or descriptive. So it'd say AN or DN. And I used to joke that DN was dinosaur notation.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. If there's a book, I mean, most books I look at now, and I do a lot of stuff on the computer. It's more modern stuff, and a lot of the classic stuff, they also, I don't want to say translated, they transferred into algebraic. But I mean, if something's in descriptive notation, a book or something, I wouldn't even look at it because I can't. But you know what it is, when I first started to get really serious and about my game, and most of it by that point was algebraic. That's just kind of when I first got into notation. That's just what I was used to doing.
I started with descriptive because that's what was there in the early 80s.
Right.
And when I played in the tournament, I started getting Chess Life, and half the articles were in descriptive and half were in algebraic. And there was actually some debate on whether they should switch to all algebraic. And of course, some of the older players were like, "Oh, I want to keep some in descriptive." And I found that once I saw algebraic notation and I switched to it, I started making a lot less score sheet errors.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it helped me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I said, the Reinfeld book was descriptive that I mentioned that I used, but I think other than that, most of it was algebraic. But yeah, it's the same thing. Those are the same people who don't like to use digital clocks. Mm-hmm. I remember playing, now it's with the USCF rules, and now it's 2022. It's a little bit different. You don't see them as much. But I remember, here on the island going to a club, and I would be playing like an older gentleman, and I'd have my digital clock set, and he would just be like, "I don't want to use that clock." Right. And you try to explain, well, the rules are that digital clocks take preference, and I don't want to use that clock. So, but for me, this is just my own code when I play. I will not play a USCF over the board tournament, a regular rated tournament, unless there's a 5-second delay that's allowed.
Right.
I won't even, because I think time delay is a great thing. I don't know what your thoughts are. I think it's a great thing. It just stops these crazy, what do they call that? Dirty flagging at the end, and it stops.
Yes, and I'm even
all that nonsense. It favors the position and chess more than the other nonsense.
Right. The chess should be more important than the clock. And I think
yes,
I'd actually like to see the delay raised. I like when some tournaments are 10-second delay. I like some of the FIDE rated tournaments are 30-second increment. I like that better. One of the things I don't like is if I'm in a 5-second delay tournament and I get down very low on time, I have to stop keeping score because otherwise you risk you losing your concentration, and I don't like to have incomplete score sheets. I like to
right. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, as you know, once either player is under 5 minutes, you can stop keeping score, but then you can't claim like a draw by threefold repetition.
I try to keep going to that point, but if it's a tough position, 5 seconds isn't enough to keep your concentration and write down the moves.
Yeah, I agree.
If you have an easy position, you can move in under 5 seconds every time. That's fine, but
10-second delay. That's interesting, Tim. I don't know. You're putting this.
I think some of the continental chess tournaments were using that.
Really?
But I didn't realize they've switched to the FIDE time control, so now a lot of them are 30-second increment.
I had no idea. If you had mentioned 10-second delay, I didn't even realize that was a thing. I mean, I know you're allowed to.
I would like to see that become more standard. Yeah.
I agree. I didn't even, like I said, I'm sort of, I guess, with my schedule, I just have kind of my own club. I haven't been paying too much attention. I haven't played in any of the major tournaments, but I didn't even, I had no idea that the 10-second thing was being used. That's an idea. Yeah. I like it.
Definitely.
I like it.
So I had a few more books that I wanted to mention, just that I started. When I was younger, I used to go to the library to get books, and I pretty much had to take out whatever they had. So they had Alexander Kotos books, Think Like a Grandmaster, Play Like a Grandmaster. Those were good ones for me. John Nunn and Peter Griffith's The Secrets of Grandmaster Play was a good one for me. It's heavily analyzed games by John Nunn.
Okay.
There's a book, How to Become a Candidate Master by Alex Dunn, which I just found out was recently reprinted, so that's available now, I think. A book that I wish I had that came out in 2015 was Chess Structures, a Grandmaster Guide by Mauricio Flores Rios.
Okay.
That's a very systematic book. It analyzes, isolated pawn, hanging pawns. It would have something like the French and Caro-Kann pawn structures, things like that. So that's I like systematic books. It's if a book's just analyzing things and the topics are scattered around. Now there's a downside to there's a book called Encyclopedia of Chess Combinations, and they had a chapter called Bishop Sacrifice on H2 or H7. And guess what the answer is from every problem in that chapter? It's
Bishop
kind of gives it away.
Check, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of gives it away. But
right. Well, that's what I mentioned in the episode before this. Episode what are we, my man? This is episode 20. This is the
20,
season 1 finale.
That's right.
How could I forget? So episode 19, I mentioned practical chess exercises by Ray Chang, where every puzzle or exercise in the book. It's basically it's a puzzle and it's white to move or black to move. Gives you no idea. You don't know if it's defense, if it's tactics, if it's positional. And
That's the same as what you'd find on that Chess King website, because they have courses that are taken from books, and it's some of them are opening specific. Like there might be one called Tactics in the French, where they go over something, and it's not always a tactical solution. It's about the middle game themes. Or it might be a positional theme. So, I like that kind of problem better than the one, the single variation best move, and it's always tactical.
Yeah. White to move and, win a piece.
Right.
They basically gave you half the answer.
Right.
There. So, all right, Tim, one more area I want to go over before I let you go. Mm-hmm. And I've, appreciate you being here, really enjoying the discussion. Let's talk about playing versus studying. Obviously, both need to be done. You need to play and study to get better. But there's a lot of discussion. Should you do more than one? Should you do both? Should you play more than you study or vice versa, that type of thing? What are your thoughts on that? Especially for an amateur player, who's looking to really increase his rating.
I think it definitely shifts the lower rated you are, I think the more playing is important. If you're hanging pieces, you have to play through that. There's no, I can't teach someone not to hang a piece. I can't make them, I could say, oh, okay, don't put your queen on a square and I can attack it, can capture it. And, but I can't make them see it, I can't make them see that that square is in danger.
No,
So,
very well said. Very well said.
You can only do that by practice.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then as you get stronger, you'll probably shift to more studying. There's a limit to how much you can learn by playing alone. So you don't want to keep making the same mistakes. You want to figure out what you've done wrong in your games and correct that. So, and that takes studying. It's, if you were to just try to learn by playing, it's basically you're shutting out the whole world. There's a world of knowledge out there. We all learn from other people. You can't just learn from yourself. You can't just play only. You're not gonna tap into the rest of the world's knowledge that way.
Very, very well said. One last thing, I'm just curious because I just thought of this now. What do you think about playing blitz and speed chess for someone who's struggling to improve? Good, bad, okay, in moderation. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's okay in moderation. I think the more important thing is that it not exclude long games. You can play. I play a lot of blitz online. It's mostly for entertainment. And anybody who plays me in blitz online, just know that I'm distracted because I have two monitors. Actually, I have three monitors. But in the center is my chess screen, and on the right is my email, and on the left is YouTube videos playing. So this is how I play blitz online.
Tim, oh my God, what happened?
So
you're supposed to be setting an example for everybody. Come on.
No, for me, it's just entertainment, and the fact that I cannot single task. I have to multitask. It's
Really? See, yeah. I had you peg. See, I would have said of anyone I know, Tim is probably like not a multitasker. Like he's so focused on. See, I wouldn't have guessed that. Yeah, but like you said, you use the word. It's for entertainment. I'm sure if you were playing online and it was a serious thing, it would be just that, nothing else. But I had that's hysterical. I had no idea that while you play your blitz games for entertainment, you have other things going on the other screen. That's funny.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes chatting with friends also.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hey, what's up? Hang on. Yeah. I got to sacrifice a bishop. Hold on a second. See, I couldn't even if it's for entertainment, I couldn't even, because I get distracted so easily. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that if you paid me, if you tried. If I'm playing, I don't play online that much, but when I do, it's, if I want to do well, if I'm concerned about it, like you said, if it's for entertainment, that's a different thing. But if I'm really playing well, or I want to play well, that needs to be the only thing I'm looking at. Because if I start checking other things, it's, because
definitely.
I have trouble concentrating, as it is.
Yeah.
All right. That's funny. Okay. So National Master Tim Mirabile, my friend, thank you for joining us. So what's going to happen is we're going to be taking a little hiatus from the podcast, and we're going to be coming back sometime in the spring for season 2. We appreciate you joining us. And as always, I hope you win your next game. We'll see you soon.